This program is brought to you by Stanford University. Please visit us at stanford.edu. The Clayman Institute for Gender Research at Stanford University, creating a more equal society for women and men through data-driven research and public education.
It is my pleasure to welcome you back and to open this final session of the conference on women's experience in Silicon Valley's entrepreneurial culture. I think the connections between the sessions are quite interesting. Yesterday, Sue Rosser was talking about women developing patents and how few actually are doing that. I think the process of commercialization of science from universities into industry is very interesting, and of course the role of women and gender in all of that. I think that also that this session connects in very interesting ways to the session we had this morning, because we're talking about how technologies shape our lives, and again women's roles in that, and so I think this will be a very interesting session. Again, the biographies are in the program, and I will introduce the keynote and also the moderator for this session, Myra Hart. Myra Hart has been a fellow with us for a quarter. She's a dynamo. It's really been a pleasure having you here, Myra. Myra is a professor of management practice at Harvard University and is just a fountain of knowledge about women in business, women in entrepreneurial culture, women in venture capital. Thank you, Myra.
I'm delighted to be with you this afternoon, but we have this rock star panel, so I really do want to introduce the rock stars. I'm going to ask them to come up here. Joyce Chung, Managing Director of Garage Technology Ventures. Diane Green, this is alphabetical, but Diane, you're at the other end just because of how we're going to talk. And she is the President, CEO, and co-founder of VMware, and if you don't know what that is, you ought to. And Ann Winblad, Managing Director and co-founder of Hummer Winblad Venture Partners, which has been around since 1989. So Ann is really a veteran in this industry. These women are all incredible. And I do not want to in any way just give you feedback on simple bios. So I've asked each one of them to take 2 or 3 minutes to introduce herself and to tell a little bit about how she got into the position she's in and why she loves it. And after that, I'll come back and ask a few questions. Joyce?
Okay. Great. So I'm Joyce Chung, and I'm with Garage Technology Ventures. We're a seed and early stage venture fund here in Palo Alto. We focus very much on entrepreneurship, very early stage entrepreneurship, and helping entrepreneurs go through the process. My background is I have an engineering degree, went to MIT many years ago and studied chemical engineering, and out of school ended up working in more in the IT world in various technical, and then I kind of moved into sales and marketing roles in a number of businesses, some startup and then a couple of larger companies. Decided to come out west to go to business school and worked in a couple companies. The last one was Adobe Systems, when I decided I wanted to kind of go back to my roots in a startup environment, and ended up kind of stumbling into venture capital with the venture group at Adobe. So they have a corporate venture group where I went to talk to the guy to see if there were any interesting companies he'd seen, and he said, well, why don't you come and work here for a little while? So this was in the late 90s. I did that, and I fell in love with the investing side of the business. And what I love about it is the energy and just the creativity of working with entrepreneurs, and really having that exposure and spending time with sort of this really vibrant, a lot of ideas, really very interesting community. You're always sort of thinking a few years out, intellectually very interesting. You're, as opposed to sort of really focusing on one topic, you can really think broadly about, gee, what's going to be, big in a few years. So I just really enjoyed that process, and decided to kind of in 2000, leave the corporate venture world and go into straight venture capital, and with another partner founded a firm called Cardinal Venture Capital and started investing. And of course, this was nuclear winter. Market tanked right after we closed our fund, but we survived through that. We raised a little more capital. We continued through there, and we now have, I think, a pretty good fund. And in last year, I decided to actually refocus again to the early seed stage investing, and joined the group at Garage Technology Ventures. So that's where I am now. But it's been a lot of fun. I'm sure we'll talk more about women in the venture business.
Hi, I'm Ann Winblad. The statistics surrounding me are different than what Myra showed. I can say that 100% of the women in my business class, undergrad, and 100% of the math majors that were women in my class went on to become entrepreneurs. That's because I was the only math major and the only business major. When I got my undergraduate double major, I went to the University of St. Thomas to get those majors. And we had a 414 program, so we always had to take an interim during the winter between the semesters. So one winter I took a class in Fortran because we didn't have a computer science minor or major. In fact, it was a liberal arts minor at Stanford at the time if you were trying to study computer science. An unfortunate thing happened to my instructor during that interim. She died. And it was a woman named Sister Seraphin Gibbons, so it was a nun teaching this class. And so they took me aside and said, you seem to be really enjoying this class and have a passion for programming. Could you teach out the rest of the interim? So I can't remember what I had people do, like probably program Snoopy calendars in Fortran or something like that. But it was a long time ago. But it was, for me, the beginning of a real passion for software. And for me, it was a big discovery. I grew up in a small town, 2,000 people, Farmington, Minnesota, and kind of like neighbors of Rebecca of Sunnybrook Farm or something like that. My dad was a high school basketball coach, my mom a nurse. I'm the oldest of 6 kids. Down the road from me in a small town, Winona, Minnesota, a few years ahead of me in school, was the Carol Bartz, who grew up in Winona, Minnesota. She grew up in a little bit bigger town, went to a little bit bigger school, the University of Wisconsin. We were leading duplicate lives, similar lives in high school. We both were class valedictorians and head cheerleaders, and also dated the captain of the football team. I have no reason why I'm actually here in Silicon Valley or started a venture capital firm. Software turned out to be a very, very young industry when I joined it, and that was very, very fortunate for me. It accommodated a lot of mistakes. It required very little capital. You just had to take the pile of straw called ones and zeros and spin them into gold. That would be products, and you had a business. That was good news because there wasn't any venture capital for this segment for quite some time. Even when we started our firm in 1989, which was the first venture firm focused 100% on software, we had 133 meetings ourselves to convince any institutional investors that there should be a fund that would focus on this ridiculous area called software, where the core assets were the intellectual capital. Didn't they run out the door at night? Since that time, we funded 110 software companies, giving them their first round of capital. Hyperion, recently acquired by Oracle, we funded 2 people, Jim and Bob. I was on their board for 6 years. Wind River in the East Bay, we funded 10 guys in a hot tub. The hot tub was above their deck. We really didn't like that because when their customers would come in, there'd be someone naked in the meeting as well. When I graduated, I worked for 1 year at the Federal Reserve Bank as a systems programmer. It was a very dull job. So one day I just quit my job to start a software company, a company called Open Systems. I convinced 3 other more experienced guys, that means they had programmed for 2 years versus my year, to take a 1-year sabbatical from their job and to start this company. We became the 16th largest personal computer software company. The company was acquired. I discovered that winter was optional and there were actually more people building software in this coast than there were in igloos in Minnesota. So I moved out here. I was stalked for 2 years by John Hummer. John at 6'10" is the tallest venture capitalist, I at 5'2" and 3/4 and probably the shortest, although Ted Swine argues with me. So we started the venture firm in '89. All of this is wrapped around really sort of following what you're passionate about, working really hard, and kind of fishing in the right pond. So that's my story.
Amazing. I guess we all have in common that we didn't really plan our careers. I started out, I grew up in Annapolis, Maryland. I was a big sailboat racer, actually, and went to, got an undergraduate degree in mechanical engineering, and then ended up at MIT studying naval architecture, got a master's degree there, and came out to the West Coast because I'd run a windsurfing regatta out here, and I thought it was a pretty nice place. And most of the jobs were actually in Texas, and I talked my way into a job here. And so I was here and doing naval architecture, offshore oil platform design, and got very involved in windsurfing and took some time off and actually moved to Hawaii for a while. And came back and decided to go to graduate school in computer science. When I was in naval architecture, I'd done a lot of computer modeling of the hydrodynamic forces. And so I went back to Berkeley and got a master's there, and then went to work for Sybase, which before they were a public company. And then actually, interestingly enough, the VP of engineering there was a woman, and she got fired, and I came in the next morning, and I have a little note from her, call me. And so I called her, and she went over to Tandem to run all the software at Tandem, so I immediately went to Tandem with her because she'd been giving me a lot of breaks and to do some very innovative things. And so I worked at Tandem until I had my first kid, at which point I took about 2 months off, and then I went to work at SGI, got involved in their interactive television project, which was a very entrepreneurial project, and it was really quite exciting and fun. And I brought database technology to it, and out of that, a lot of Silicon Valley Netscape a lot of the Netscape people came out of that, and AdForce, DoubleClick, and so forth. And I left and started my first company from there, which was internet video serving, low bandwidth streaming video, and that got bought by Microsoft. And actually, when I started that company, I didn't start it. I co-founded it with some Stanford people, and we couldn't find a CEO. We couldn't convince anybody to be the CEO, so I just kind of ran it while we were looking for a CEO. Anyhow, so after that, I took some time off, and then actually Hummer Windblad convinced me to go consult for them for a little company down in Southern California, which I did for a while my husband is a professor at Stanford in computer science, and he was doing some very interesting research, and we kept saying we should really do something with this. So that company, I helped them bring in a CEO, and we started VMware, the company I'm the CEO and president of now, and that was 10 years ago, and it's now, we just, in 2007, did $1.3 billion on 88% growth year over year.